Chapter 10. I awoke to a throbbing pain in my leg. I looked down to see Natsuki tucked in close to me. I looked at my clock to see that it was already 10 o'clock. I wrapped an arm around her and closed my eyes, pushing my nose into her hair. She didn't smell like fruit or sugar and spice and all that sort of stuff like in the fairy tales, but nonetheless, I rather enjoyed it. I kissed her head and gave her a small squeeze. Hummed Natsuki. Her eyes slowly opened before she looked up at me. Am I dreaming? She asked with a smile. I'd ask myself just the same thing, I replied. I pet back her messy hair. The little pigtails that she usually had were gone, and her hair, though short, was as messy as any long hair could be. I love your bed, she cooed. I love it too. Even more so now that you're in it, I replied. Natsuki smiled as we laid in silence. Are you hungry, Natsuki? A little, she said. Her stomach rumbled and she then changed her answer to maybe a little more than a little. It was about pancakes and bacon and eggs, I asked. Natsuki's eyes lit up as she jumped from the bed, throwing the blanket in the air. Quickly, however, she retreated back to me as the cold air hit her and my skin at the same time. It's warmer in here, she shivered, tucking herself back in with me. Hey, you at least have one of my shirts, right? All I've got is boxers, I said. That's your fault, dummy. You should wear pajamas, she taunted. I didn't have much of a reply, other than, well, boxers feel better, I said. They do look better too, I'll give you that, she teased. I wrapped my arms around her and rolled over onto her, though I did manage to keep my weight off of her using my elbows. Ow! I groaned. Are you okay? Damn bruises still hurt. I rolled off of her and laid down. Well, I hope they don't hurt too much for you to cook because I'm starting to get really hungry, she said. I could tell she was trying to change the mood, and I did my best to go along with it because I knew there was nothing good to come of moping around in bed. Nothing's too much to ask when it comes to you, darling, I replied. She slid out of bed and put on a pair of thermal pants which sagged a great deal on her. I got up and put on clothes of my own before heading into the kitchen. I couldn't believe all that had occurred in the last few days. Did I really have a new girl living with me this soon? I mean, we really did just meet, right? Natsuki helped me whip up the batter, even adding things that I'd never known to add. I really like to bake. Whenever Papa would let me, or if people gave me their ingredients, it was always my favorite thing to do, she said. But I don't really know how to cook other stuff. Pots and pans are a little bit too much for me, she joked. Funny you say that, because I'm really not the best at baking. Though I don't quite suck, I said as I took the bowl of mix from her. The butter sizzled as I poured batter over it, quickly frying the bottom of the first cake a nice golden brown. We sat at the table with the food in front of us and began to feast. Natsuki grabbed several pancakes right off the bat, adding jam and syrup to hers. I scooped a helping of eggs and bacon onto my fork and tasted her pancake recipe. Man, those are good, I said to her. She smiled and kept on eating. When we finished, there wasn't really much of anything left to put away but the dishes. We sat in the living room in front of the television watching anime. Hey Natsuki, I asked. Yeah, she replied. She kept staring at the TV and held her head firmly against my chest. Tell me about yourself. Natsuki didn't say anything for a bit before at last asking, Well, what do you want to know? Well, I mean, like, I don't know, what's your favorite color? I started. Pink, duh, she answered. Favorite food? Cupcakes? Favorite subject in school? I asked. Natsuki took my hand as she replied, Literature? I looked at her as she smiled. Her gaze was fixed on my chest, but I could tell it wasn't really so much that she was staring at my chest, as she was just deep in thought. I always loved fantasy books. They were the first I would go to when Mama and Papa used to take me to the library, thinking about all kinds of magical places, places where people are happy. I felt at home inside of them, or at least, I feel like I would belong there, right? In a place where heroes always win. I've always dreamed of becoming strong like them one day, taking on my bullies, tyrants of the land. Natsuki cheered as she seemingly reveled in her imagined victories. Her smile stopped though as she went on. Maybe I could even stand up to my father. A few tears rolled down her face, and I wiped them with a finger. I grasped her hand and thought of what to say next. You know, Natsuki, you're already partially there. You have a wish, you have resolve. Now, all we have to do is put the resolve to work, right? She smiled a little. You know, I think you're my hero. Hero? How so? The fact that you offered help to me without even knowing me. The fact you stood up to my father even when you lost. The fact that you took me in when he kicked me out. The fact that you're here with me right now. I thought about what she had said. You know, if I hadn't met you, I doubt I could have ever done any of those things. I mean, look, until I met you, honestly, I really just kept to myself. I wasn't really brave. I think I was actually rather cowardly. I could have never stood up to somebody like your dad if it were for anyone else. Well, maybe there's a hero in all of us then, Natsuki posed. I looked at her as she looked back up, realizing what she had just said. We sat on the sofa for some time before going to my room. I showed her my computer games and manga, but her attention was diverted when she found an old tub of Lego in my closet. She quickly lost herself in it, and by the end of the afternoon, we had put together a formidable castle with knights at a drawbridge and a king and queen on the throne. Natsuki played as I watched her. That was the innocence that I had seen before, the joy, the happiness. It was exactly those things that I swore to protect from then on. Everything she did was so precious to me, and I would do anything to see her smile. At last I had found purpose in my life, and she was my purpose in life. Chapter 11. The next day was a bit less eventful. We once more ate a big breakfast, but rather than settling down after, I took Natsuki out back to help me take care of some chores. We have to split wood? She asked. Well, I can cut it if you'd rather, I said, even though I knew the answer. You can just stack up the bits I finish and bring me a new log to cut. We worked at this for a while until we'd had a week's worth of firewood. The house doesn't have a great furnace, and it's easier to just heat the stove in the living room than run the furnace all night, I said to Natsuki. You know, I've thought about being a farmer before, she said, huffing and puffing while bringing me the last log to cut. But I didn't think it'd be this much work. Well, this is only something you have to do every once in a while. You know, every week, every few weeks. Sure, but still, imagine, like, plowing and tilling and... She sighed as she wiped her forehead. She wore an older linen shirt of mine and a jacket liner over it. We gotta get you some new clothes, I said to her. Maybe we could do that today. We moved some of the firewood indoors and covered the wood pile outside, and then took a quick shower each, while the other got ready to head out. We walked out the door and through the neighborhood to the shops at a small strip mall nearby. Natsuki's favorite store was there, which she stated she had not been there since her 16th birthday 2 years prior. We arrived, and to no surprise, it had a large pink facade sitting in front of a white background. A sign above the door read Doki Doki. There were many clothes in there to choose from, and quickly I found myself lost from Natsuki, as she ran about picking up clothes from one spot and then moving to another. "Come on," she said. "I want to try these ones." I sat outside of the fitting room where she then proceeded to model each outfit she picked out. A few pairs of jeans, some flannels, a fleece sweater, and warmer winter boots than the old rubber rain boots that she'd had. She even picked up a waterproof that actually fit her well. We left the shop with her picks and a few extras. She had found some t-shirts on the way out with her favorite anime on them. We even got to stop at a diner where we ordered a few burgers, before sitting down at a booth. Natsuki's head barely reached the top of the seat as she leaned back into the cheap vinyl padding. "Now this is a date," she cheered. It both amazed me and saddened me at how easily Natsuki could be impressed. I figured she probably hadn't been on many dates before, if any, due to her father. It only went to show how neglected she was. The waiter arrived and set down our drinks. Natsuki got a strawberry milkshake, while I simply got a club soda. She grinned as she bit the cherry from the top and chewed it with glee. "So?" I asked. "Are you having a good time?" "Mm-hmm," she hummed. She took a sip of her drink. I asked her about the anime from the shirts that she bought, and she explained the plots of each to me. "And so the mage has to work with the knight, and her friends too, to defeat the threat of the kingdom. So, how do they manage that? I mean, what, it's just two versus a bunch of big dudes?" I asked. "Well, they're not alone. They work together." "Obviously, idiot. No one could win against those kind of bad guys alone. But they work together. They count on each other. They're inseparable," she explained. The waiter left us our food and we got to eating. Natsuki looked around for the best part to start her cheeseburger from before just biting into the side right in front of her. She could barely fit the whole thing into her mouth. The diner had rather large burgers, and I took a bite out of mine, a bacon burger, before sitting back. It was at least an hour later when we left the diner, and the sun was much lower in the sky now. We'd left a bit past noon and spent an hour in the store, maybe an hour in the diner. Must have been about 4 by now. We walked home in each other's arms, with full bellies and far from empty-handed. We got home and I sat down in the living room, starting a fire in the stove. Natsuki went to the bedroom to put some of her new clothes away. I couldn't find the laundry basket, so I just stacked the ones I wanted washed on your computer chair, if that's okay," she stated as she walked back into the living room. "Can I ask you something?" she said, sitting next to me. I looked at her to see a worried look on her face. "Is something wrong, Natsuki?" "Can you help me with my homework?" she grinned sheepishly. On one hand, part of me was relieved at the fact that she was okay, but on the other, I wasn't really so good at homework myself. By the time we were almost done with it, it was well into the night. "So, I'm pretty sure on this one, you have to, do inverse sine of these two sides, I think," I said as I tried to be sure that I was understanding the problem. "Mm-hmm," sighed Natsuki. Natsuki had a blanket over herself as I helped her through the homework. She set down the paper on the table beside us and placed her head on my chest. "Is that it?" I asked. "Mm-hmm," she replied. I let out a small sigh of relief and hugged her back and held her close to me. Between her and the fire I felt quite warm. "Can't we stay this way forever?" she asked. I didn't say anything for a bit as I watched the flames dance. "Maybe someday forever. But for now, at least, we have tonight. Shall we get ready for bed?" Natsuki nodded before getting off of me and taking the blanket with her. I closed the damper on the stove and spread the coals before shutting the door. I cleaned up a bit before going to the restroom and preparing for bed. By the time I got back to my room, I found Natsuki in bed with a little stuffed cat. "Where'd you get that from?" I asked. I keep it in my bag sometimes, usually when I'm stressed. I kinda like to sleep with her. I didn't take her out last night because honestly I forgot that I had her in my bag until I was putting my work away, she answered. I climbed into bed with her and shut off the lamp by the bed. Good night, Natsuki, I whispered. Good night. I love you. I love you too.